My name is Richard James Carter. I am 92 years old now, and for more than 70 years, I have carried the echoes of World War II with me. People see an old man with shaking hands and tired eyes. They see a man who walks slowly, who pauses to catch his breath, and who sometimes stares off into the distance as if listening to something only he can hear. What they don't see is the 19-year-old sergeant I once was, standing in the middle of a war-torn village, dirt and blood caked to my uniform, the roar of bombs shaking the ground beneath my feet. I have lived decades since the war ended, but the war has never truly ended inside me. It has simply grown quieter, waiting in the shadows of my memory. I enlisted shortly after I turned 18. Like many young men of my generation, I didn't fully comprehend the weight of what I was signing up for. I knew the world was at war. I knew men were dying, and I knew I could die as well. But nothing could have prepared me for the reality that hit when I first stepped onto the battlefield. Training taught us to march, to aim, to follow orders, to lead men, but no one taught us how to face fear that comes in waves, that sinks into your chest and refuses to leave. That lesson came later, in fire and smoke and death. By the time I reached Europe, I was 19 years old and already a sergeant. I had been promoted faster than I ever imagined, not because I was exceptional, but because circumstances demanded it. I was placed in command of a squad of men, boys really, most of them barely older than I was. We were thrown into villages and forests, into towns that had been flattened by shelling, streets lined with rubble and silence. And yet, amidst all of that, life went on. Men laughed when they could, sang when they could, wrote letters home when they had the strength. We learned to cling to small comforts because they were the only thing keeping our sanity intact. The first time I saw a village bombed, I understood the sheer power of destruction. The air was thick with dust and smoke, the ground shaking with the impact of shells, windows shattered, roofs caved in, and in the midst of it all, people tried to survive. We advanced cautiously, every step measured, every sound a potential signal of danger. I remember gripping the rifle in my hands so tightly my knuckles went white, telling myself not to panic, repeating over and over that my men depended on me. Fear was a constant companion, but it became a tool. I learned to use it, to channel it into focus and action. One of the battles that remains burned in my mind took place in the winter of 1944. During the Ardennes offensive. Snow covered everything, turning the forest into a silent white wasteland. The Germans were advancing, and we had orders to hold our position no matter what. The cold was merciless. Our fingers became numb. Our faces were raw with frostbite. But the enemy did not pause for the weather. Shells tore through trees, fire streaked across the snow, and every shot we fired carried the weight of survival. I watched as men I had trained with fell beside me, their lives ending in a blink. I remember the helplessness, the guilt, and the anger all at once. You carry those feelings for a lifetime. The responsibility of leadership was overwhelming. Every decision I made affected the lives of others. Should I advance and risk ambush? Should I hold and risk being overrun? Each choice was a calculus of survival, and each wrong choice could be fatal. I remember shouting orders in the chaos, hearing the gunfire and explosions echoing through the forest, seeing my men react, some frozen with fear, some moving instinctively because they trusted me. I was 19, and yet I felt centuries old, burdened with decisions that no young man should have to make. Life during those years was a mixture of chaos and monotony. One day you could be under fire, the next trudging through endless mud, snow, or rain, performing seemingly endless drills, repairing equipment, or moving supplies. The waiting was almost as hard as the fighting. You would lie in a trench, listening to the distant sounds of battle, counting the minutes, counting the lost, wondering if you would survive the night. Letters from home were precious and rare. We clung to them as reminders of the world outside the war, reminders of people and lives untouched by the conflict. Even a small scrap of news from a loved one could bring a fleeting sense of hope. The emotional toll was immense. I remember nights when I lay awake, thinking of the men who had died that day, replaying their final moments in my mind. Sleep came in fits and starts, dreams invaded by explosions and screams. Sometimes I would wake in the middle of the night, convinced that the distant sound of a passing truck was the enemy coming to attack. Years later, those memories would return in unexpected ways. A firework, a car backfiring, the crack of a branch underfoot, each triggering the same fear, the same flash of the past. It never really leaves you. You learn to live with it, but it is always there, just beneath the surface. There were moments of camaraderie, small slices of humanity that kept us going. I remember sharing what little food we had, making jokes to break the tension, and looking out for each other in ways that transcended duty. In the mud and blood, we became brothers, bound by necessity and by the shared trauma of surviving. The bonds formed in combat are unlike any other, forged in fire and fear, and they last a lifetime. Even when the war ended, those friendships remain, though many of my friends did not. The absence of those faces is a weight that never goes away. When the war finally ended, I expected relief, perhaps even joy, and I felt a little of both, but mostly I felt exhaustion and a strange emptiness. The world had moved on while we were gone. People celebrated victory, yet the images of destroyed towns, dead friends, and endless suffering lingered in my mind. Returning home was not the happy reunion I had imagined. I had changed, my perspective on life forever altered, and I struggled to reconcile the person I had become with the boy I had been. I worked to build a normal life, to laugh, to love, to live, but the echoes of bombs never fully faded. Over the decades, I tried to share my experiences cautiously. Some people listened, some did not understand, but telling the story became a necessity, a way of honoring the men who did not make it home. Every time I recount the events, I feel their presence, their sacrifice, and their courage. The war shaped me, but in turn it made me cherish life in a way I would never have understood otherwise. Simple moments, a quiet morning, a meal with family, the sound of birds, carry weight and meaning because I know what it is like to face chaos and death. Now, at 92 years old, I reflect more openly on those years. I think about the boys I led, some of whom were barely teenagers, and how quickly we were forced to grow up. I think about the silence after the explosions, the eerie calm in destroyed towns and dead friends, and the courage it took to keep moving forward. I do not tell these stories for praise or sympathy. I tell them so that they are remembered, so that the weight of history is not forgotten, and so that future generations understand the true cost of war, not in statistics, but in human lives and memories. I was a sergeant in the U.S. Army during World War II. I saw fear, courage, loss, and resilience all in a single day. I survived when many did not, and I carry their memory with me. I remember the smell of smoke and wet earth, the flash of explosions, the shouts of men, and the quiet that followed. I remember laughter amidst terror, compassion amidst brutality, and hope amidst despair. These memories are stitched into me, part of my identity, and as long as I can speak, I will share them. As long as someone listens, the sacrifices and experiences of my generation will not be forgotten. The war taught me patience, endurance, and the preciousness of life. It taught me to hold loved ones close, to savor moments of peace, and to honor those who gave everything so that others might survive. I learned that courage is not always visible, and that heroism often appears in small, quiet actions rather than grand gestures. Most importantly, I learned that memory is a sacred duty. To forget would be to betray those who lived and died beside me. Even now, I sometimes hear the sound of bombs. It is faint, almost a whisper, but it takes me back instantly to the roads and villages of Europe, to the frozen forests, to the men who fought and fell beside me. It is a sound that has followed me for more than 70 years, a reminder that war is never truly over, not for those who survive it. And yet, I also hear the laughter of friends long gone, the whispers of encouragement, and the bonds that carried us through the darkest days. These are the echoes of life, intertwined with the echoes of war, and they define who I am. I am Richard James Carter. I am 92 years old, and I can still hear the bombs. I have survived, and I remember. And as long as someone listens, the stories of those years, the faces of those who never returned, and the lessons of courage and endurance will live on. This is my story. This is the story of 3 years of hell, carried forward for a lifetime.